You're listening to the SoleStrategies podcast hosted by the team here at SoleStrategies. We hope you like the latest episode and thanks for tuning in.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the SoleStrategies podcast. I'm your host, James Ray, at James Gets Political on TikTok. And today I'm going to be talking about the importance of Praxis and what activism looks like in LA with my colleague and friend, Kai. They're a political activist and educator, as one of the founders of a new leftist bookstore out of LA called All Power. You can find them on TikTok at the handle What's Antifa and on Twitter at Tanky Pilled. So, Kai, let's get started. How is Los Angeles today?
Yeah, wow, that was a good introduction. Yeah, I mean, I've grown up in LA my entire life, so it just like means a lot to me. It's really awesome. I love it here. But the activism scene is like also like really amazing, I have to say. Like, I'm glad there's so many like big tent organizations and like grassroots organizations, so that you don't have to like fall into the depths of electoralism if you don't want to. But yeah.
No, valid. I mean, SoleStrategies and really what I do is a lot of electoral work. So it's nice to see the other end of that, the actual like on the ground organizing and activist work. I mean, how's that been out in Los Angeles, especially in the last year or so with COVID and with the Black Lives Matter movement really picking up steam, particularly in LA? I imagine that's been a hell of a time on the ground for you.
Yeah. So with the George Floyd uprising, it was just amazing to see so many people on the ground. I've never been to a protest where there were so many people. Most notably, there was one where like 100,000 people went or something along those lines. Like we were just like marching down Hollywood. And that was like really, I think, the catalyst for my work on the ground. I would say before I wasn't really like truly radicalized, and I was definitely more of like an armchair leftist. I was just like, well, I'm just gonna like learn and make TikToks, and that's enough of the praxis from my end. But actually like viewing police brutality like in real time, even like, you know, getting hit by like a rubber bullet myself, or like getting arrested or whatever, like experiencing that myself, I was like, fuck, like, and this is not even, you know, the worst of it, like I'm still alive. But yeah, it's been a hell of a year. LAPD and LASD are like the worst police forces in the entire nation. They have, you know, no problem just shooting everybody with rubber bullets indiscriminately, sending off these things called stinger grenades, which basically shoot upwards in the air, explode, shoot downwards, explode a flashbang, and then shoot out pepper balls. So it's like, why do you even have that? But yeah, so I've met like the most amazing comrades that like, you know, I didn't even know existed here in LA through being on the ground and through like grassroots organizing. So that's been really amazing.
No, I love that. Just a brief clarification for everyone else, because I sometimes I get into words that I leftists understand and a lot of other people
too. For sure.
The idea of praxis, for those of you who might not already know, praxis is essentially Greek for the literal word practice. It's essentially putting into practice things you learn through like theory, and like it's real world application of leftist theory. Essentially, is the most simplistic means I can I can break that down. Would you say that's fairly accurate? I would say.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you know, the saying like theory informs praxis is also like really important. I feel like reading just about theory like really helped me understand like why things were the way that they were. And like, I really want to accentuate the fact that like praxis in LA, so like the practice of actually like doing leftist work is like so different in LA than like, you know, some small city in like the Midwest or like in the South. You know, bigger cities like New York and LA, they're like really on the ground, Portland, Seattle. But a lot of my work has been like on the ground protesting, as well as like doing mutual aid. But yeah, I think like mutual aid is becoming quite like a more mainstream thing here in LA.
Could you talk a little bit more mutual aid scene in Los Angeles, what all like that constitutes, etc.? Yeah,
for sure. So the unhoused population here in LA is just really out of control because our mayor like really sucks. So a lot of the mutual aid efforts here focus on the unhoused. There are like several, like encampments where there's just like a huge population of unhoused folks. So the mutual aid here often looks like going and just like doing outreach, even just like talk to them and make sure that they actually want you there. I think that's something that a lot of people kind of like don't think about. It's like, do the outreach, do the work to actually make sure that these people like want your help, right? And mutual aid also, it's like works off the saying like solidarity, not charity. So it's like, you're building relationships with these folks. And it often just looks like, even just a couple of friends or an organization going out to an encampment and building relationships with them. We've made friends with so many folks down in the area that we serve. A lot of it is just like crowdfunded. So like we get crowdfunding, we go buy essentials, hot food, waters. Like we have like all these huge like ice chests with drinks and stuff. But that's generally what it looks like. But there's like a lot of, like smaller like affinity groups, just like friends that just want to help out. Like bigger tent organizations, like I believe DSA LA does like mutual aid, Ground Game LA does mutual aid as well. But yeah, it's really becoming like a more mainstream thing, because we, during the pandemic at least, have really seen the failures of our government, because people are like still getting evicted out of their houses, even though it's like, or their apartments rather, even though there's like a moratorium in place. So I think like people are becoming more cognizant of the fact that like they too are struggling, and then that like kind of gives them a lens to look at like other folks, and they're like, oh damn, like these people are straight up being like fucked by the government. But yeah, I'm like really glad to see that a lot of mutual aid organizations and efforts are like popping up in LA, and you can do it too anywhere you are. I think that's like the easiest way to like segue into leftism, especially if you live in like a conservative area, because outright saying like, oh, like I'm a socialist, or like whatever sect of leftist you are, I think is like met with backlash oftentimes. But I think mutual aid, it's like, you can build those relationships without being quote unquote like inflammatory to like people that might live in like your community, if you care about that.
No, that makes total sense to me. And I mean, and you've gone like, from, to just talk about your personal successes a little bit, you've gone above and beyond, I think, what would contemporarily be understood as like, is more than, well, you're welcome. I mean, more than just mutual aid and in protesting, et cetera. You've built from the ground up, in tandem with partners of yours, an entire bookstore essentially dedicated to creating a safe space for the discussion of leftist politics, news, et cetera, and for education, which I think is unbelievable. How did you come across wanting to do that? Like, what was the process for that, if you don't mind me asking?
For sure. It was like the most random, like ragtag thing I have ever experienced in my entire life. So I opened it up with 4 other comrades. Ever since my radicalization, I feel like education has just been like severely lacking. Because when I started to learn more about things like, for example, like the Tulsa massacre, I was like, I did not learn that in school. And like, you have to do all of this unlearning. Like I'm Vietnamese, and like I always learned that like America tactically withdrew from the Vietnam War, and like the communists were bad and this and that. And I was like, I really learned about it, and I was like, what the hell? Like we literally did not learn the correct thing. So I think like ever since that thought really like crossed into my mind, I was like, damn, like we really need a space where people can just like come and learn and like be around other comrades. Because I mean, having like a storefront and like any kind of like space in a major city is expensive as fuck. And like, let's like, leftists are often poor. Like that's why we care about the issues that like we do, is because like we are working class people. So yeah, that's kind of like how it came to fruition. It was like really random. Basically we opened up this past week actually, and about like 2.5 months ago, like 2 of our comrades just like came, and like we were like in a group chat, and they're like, hey, like so I think we're gonna sign a lease, like do you guys want to open up a bookshop? And we're like, what? Yes, we do. So like the opportunity definitely like kind of just like landed in my lap. But of course it's like something that we've always wanted to do ever since like our radicalization journey. It was just like, how do we do it? And it like really helped that like the 2 comrades that had looked at the space together, One is in like a well-known hardcore band called Stick to Your Guns. His name is Jesse. And then his partner, Sav, she has like a lot of followers on Instagram, and she's just like very like outspoken about being a communist. So it's like that really helped us like crowd fund and like get it all together. And then obviously like I'm on TikTok and Twitter. But yeah, so it's just like everything like really, it's like a lot of luck, that kind of played in our favor. And the opportunity for like myself is just like landed in our lap. But the grand opening was like really awesome. I was like, damn, I did not know LA was this based, because we like pretty much sold out of like almost everything, like the grand opening. And I was like, what? Like, where have you all
kidding?
Been? No. Okay. Because literally I was like, in my head, I was like, we're going to have the grand opening. There's going to be like one person outside. Like, we're just going to be like in an empty shop. Like, I don't know. That's just how all of us thought. And we're just like anxious for like, there's going to be nobody here. But like, like pretty, there's like a medium-sized line, I guess, like formed outside pre-grand opening. And it was really awesome doing like community outreach. And our mission is just like to be a space for the people. Like, we are at the mercy of the community. We're like located in a working class neighborhood that's like pretty central to like most things. So it's just like, we don't want like the education to be, we don't want there to be a barrier to like education, because like, as we see with like Biden's extremist document, like it's not really safe for a lot of people, primarily like BIPOC, to be like leftists, like outspoken leftists. So like we want to offer this space, not only as a bookshop, but like we're a co-working area, I guess. We have like free Wi-Fi and like tables and outlets, whatever, as well as like events. Most recently, this past Friday, we had a screening of Gaza Fights for Freedom, which is a documentary about the Great March of Return protests in Gaza in 2018. And we also had the director, Abby Martin, and the producer, Mike Reisner, come in and like do a Q&A in person. We like streamed it and everything, and it was like really awesome. But yeah, that's like kind of like our kickoff event. Like, we want to do a lot of stuff like tenants' rights workshops, which are like really important primarily in LA and like other major cities. But yeah, it's really exciting. I'm just like, it doesn't feel real. Like, honestly, like I'm just there, and it just feels like I'm just hanging out. Like, I'm just like in this building, like hanging out that I pay rent at for some reason. Like, it doesn't really even feel like ours. It's just like a nice, like, we're just like, okay, this is a nice shop. Like, now what? But yeah,
Weird
it's
side
really
note. Weird side note. How was meeting Mike Reisner? I know his speech in DC was one of the first,
yes.
like when I was still I think not a leftist, when I was still very liberal, watching his speech in DC talking about returning home from conflict. He was, for background, he was a soldier, for those who might not know, and him criticizing the US government's actions abroad was something that was really eye-opening and kind of rattling for me, or really groundbreaking for me in a lot of ways. And I think his continued social media presence and his activism is unbelievable. And I imagine it must have been really cool meeting him.
Yeah, I like don't have a lot of like fanboy moments, but I was just like, damn, like I've watched this dude's video like so many times. Like, just for background for the audience, like it's just like a speech in DC that he did. He was like in an organization which has escaped me. But basically he's saying like the gist of the speech is like, our enemies are not abroad, they're not poor people abroad, they're like the richest people in America. And like you, James, like I watched that video so many times also as a liberal, and I was like, I think he's onto something. But yeah, he was like super cool, like very like thought-provoking and like hopeful. Like during the Q&A, like he offered a lot of hope and like insight, because both him and Abby were basically saying like the tide is turning. LA had the biggest Free Palestine marches like ever, just a few weeks ago. And I was in attendance for those, and it was like really awesome to see that, because I feel like even as a liberal, I was like, yeah, like Free Palestine, like as a person of color, I was like, yeah, Free Palestine. But I didn't know like everything behind it. And like watching that documentary and then like getting to meet the producer and like the director was like really awesome. But yeah, I definitely feel that way. Like the tide is turning for a lot of things, I think. like plant the seeds of revolution. Like that's what we're hoping to do with like the bookshop as well. It's like, let's, plant the seeds of revolution. If it doesn't happen in our lifetimes, then like make it easier for the generations to come after us.
Hey, you're listening to the SoleStrategies podcast. Take a moment to listen to some of our esteemed champions and their takeaways from the program.
It was very important for me to manage time, and the program again helped with the discipline of time and helping with the management of time, so that you can actually structure yourself to do that what you desire for your races.
For more information, head over to SoleStrategies.com now.
No, absolutely. I actually weeks back did an episode of this podcast actually with a guy, my friend Josh. He's the memes on TikTok, and he's an eco-socialist who was saying the exact same things. He was saying that like one of the beautiful things about the new generation is that a lot of tides seem to be turning, particularly in major cities like New York, LA, Chicago, Detroit, but really nationwide, where you're starting to see this new generation of people not only fight for reformation of the system, but question some of the fundamental principles of the system itself. And I think that on paper, small, but extremely noticeable shift has been so critical for the political evolution of like the newest, particularly like Gen Z and like the youngest millennials.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's kind of the beautiful thing about, I mean, you do activism as well through TikTok and Twitter. And so you do a lot of social media stuff on your own. And I don't know about you, from my experience on social media, particularly through TikTok, I've seen an upswell of very young voices who have these critiques, but they don't necessarily have a framework, or they don't necessarily know how to focus the energy they have. And it becomes really critical to educate and kind of point people in a direction that is functional, that won't just kind of waste their energy, like I've seen on some endeavors. But that educational element is so unbelievably critical. And I'm actually very jealous you were able to start this bookstore in Los Angeles. I'm from Southern Indiana, so I can't tell you how much of a difference it might have made in both my life and the lives of colleagues to be able to have a space where that was kind of designated. I think we do have leftist type bookstores in Indiana, in one of our college towns, Bloomington. But outside of that area, it's not the case. I live in a very red state, both on paper and functionally. Gerrymandering wasn't needed to the degree as it is in some states to make this a conservative state. But no, it's an amazing project nonetheless. I mean, it's past the opening day. Have y'all seen kind of continued energy for what you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. Well, opening day was just like fucking nuts. It was like there's just so many people in there, and I was like, yo, like I cannot believe this many people are comrades, but also like I can't believe like this many people just like came through just to say hi. Like people drove like hours. People drove from like, I won't name the cities to like dox them, but they like, there are some people that drove upwards of like 3 or 4 hours to like come to the shop, and we're just like, what? Like that's just like so insane to us, because it's like we didn't know that. I mean, obviously we knew that we were filling a niche, but we didn't know like so many of these comrades were like so based, and like they're just awesome. Like I just loved like meeting new people. Like I'm an extrovert and I have probably ADHD, so I just love talking, but like yeah, like I just was meeting so many people, and I was like, wow, like this is like community. Like like this is like fucking community. Like just a comrade yesterday came up and just like embroidered like a bunch of like custom stuff for us, like just like shirts, like the sickest shirts ever with like our logo and like just like a little red star and like hats. I was like, are you kidding me? Like you guys are all so nice, and it's just like mind-boggling. But also like to your point about like giving the youth like a space for that, that's like one of our like priorities as well. Like we really want to do like mutual aid projects, because like we're still in debt right now, but once we're out of that, like we really want to like like start this endeavor into like really like large mutual aid projects to actually like serve the community that we're in, because it is like it's a pretty like good mix of like I guess business. Like we don't even consider ourselves a business because we're operating like not for profit. Like we all just like work on the side and we're just like in the shop. But it's like a lot of like single family housing and like some apartments. So it's like we want to do like a school supply drive. We want to like offer a space for like kids to like feel safe, you know? But yeah, so it's just like I wish I had some space like that growing up. I went to high school and middle school in like a very like conservative white area of like on the tip of LA. And that was just like horrible. Like I would say I was like progressive in high school, and it was just like hell. Like I can't imagine, because so many kids now I'm seeing like are socialists and communists, and I'm like, you guys are so based. And I wish like I had come to that like conclusion way sooner than I did, which was like a year and a half ago. But yeah, so like I feel like this space is going to be like very helpful for kids, which I hope it does. Because we have had like some kids stop by and be like, yeah, like I took like 4 buses to get here, and we're like, please take everything in the shop, like just whatever you want, just take it. Like, do you want a shirt? Like, do you want a poster? Like, and it's just like really heartwarming, you know, because it's like because I'm 22, so I'm like still Gen Z, but I don't know, I just feel like I'm maybe on the cusp of like young millennial. I don't even know, but just like seeing young kids like gives me so much hope, because I'm just like, wow, like you guys came to like this massive conclusion like so much sooner than I did, like 5, 6, even like 7 or 8 years like before even I did. And I'm like, y'all take everything in the shop. Like, is there anything I can do for you? Like, I will personally drive you back home. Like, you guys are awesome. And it just gives me like so much hope, you know, because I feel like a lot of people like don't see that. They're just like, oh yeah, there's like communists, but like we'll never win against like this system. But I'm like, no, like Gen Z, as much as people clown on them, they're based, you know, like we're like born into, you know, a society that like already like faced 9/11, you know, like 9/11 had already happened, or like happened during our childhood, had like the 2008 like economic crash with like the housing crisis, like everyone's parents got divorced, like shit like that. But I feel like that was like really what pushed people into like, damn, the system is like not working, you know, for like Gen Z.
Is a child of divorced parents that did divorce pre-2008. I would like to acknowledge that we did beat the curve, and I'm happy about that. But yeah, you're not wrong.
Mine was post 2008. However, I'm sure there's stuff going on that I just don't remember.
Hey, there we go. 2 sides of the same divorce coin.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think like just being born into that was like really turned like kids anti-capitalist.
No, I think so
like,
too. I mean, you know, even like the youngest of people in Gen Z now, like, you know, early 2000s, it can at least have witnessed at least like 2 major economic collapses in their lifetimes, you know, 2008, whether it be the pandemic recession, whether it be recessions, like intermediate recessions that occurred between those periods. I mean, you're witnessing a generation that's becoming increasingly disillusioned with like what we contemporarily understand as like the business cycle, is like this up and down, where
for sure,
instead of like acknowledging like, oh, there's, you know, there's troughs, you know, there's these bottoming out periods, you know, you have these people that are like, well, why do we have to have this? Why is it that we just accept mass suffering for a year and you know, or several years, and then go back to business as usual for only a select segment of our society?
Exactly.
And I think that's really interesting. I think the Gen Z as well, you know, and I tie this back into Los Angeles as well, from what I saw during the Palestine oriented marching and protests there, is that there's this increasingly important internationalist perspective, I think, amongst Gen Z.
Absolutely.
And I think social media has played a huge role in that, where like you're now seeing people from other countries who are pitching their ideas to you and talking about what's going on in their own countries, rather than being kind of spoon-fed that by people at home who may or may not actually know that many people abroad.
For sure.
And I think that interconnectivity has really made it difficult for US politicians in particular to ignore international issues, or to downplay our role in international crises. And I think that's like been a really interesting change. As someone who studies human rights, and I can't express how happy it makes me.
For sure.
Like historically the issue with like human rights oriented issues is that like it's really hard to get domestic US support for anything really, or get US government to like acknowledge that there might be a problem in some some facet of the world order. But like to see a generation that's openly critical of these issues, even though they themselves are at times so young, they're just coming to understand them, just their bare understandings is so I don't know, beautiful. You said it gives you hope. I mean, it does for me as well. Like seeing 17-year-olds, like 16-year-olds who have an equally good grasp of certain concepts that I just got a year ago makes me so happy, because I'm 23. I'm sitting here and I'm like, wow, I'm seeing 16-year-olds that are sounding as eloquent as me right now. When they're in their 20s, if they don't become disillusioned and throw the whole thing away, you're talking about just a powerful generation. I mean, I know you're in Los Angeles, in Washington right now. Stephanie Gallardo is running a Marxist campaign with DSA out near Seattle. That's incredible to me. Like you have like people who are now openly leftist, more so than just like democratic socialists, but like open Marxists who are like, no, I'm going to run for Congress. Like just even playing electorally. That's nuts to me.
Same. And like, just like, I'm sure that you could relate to this when like kids message me and they're like, I just want to thank you because like you helped radicalize me. I'm like, stop, I will cry right now. But like, they're planting the seeds of revolution. Like it makes me so happy, you know? But yeah, like the open, like leftist, just like electoralism. I'm just like, damn, like that hasn't even happened really like in LA, I feel like. Like people are obviously like endorsed by the DSA, but I don't think anyone in LA has been like, yeah, like we're a Marxist, like, or I'm a Marxist. I don't think that has happened yet, but like, you know, I think until we get to the point where like a majority of like, or at least like close to, you know, equal people are actually like staunchly like anti-capitalist or like staunchly leftist, like I think having Marxists run campaigns is like good. Like having Marxists in office is good. And we've had some like failures here in LA where one of the candidates, well actually she won, but one of the like councilwomen, I believe, she was like endorsed by DSA and a lot of like grassroots organizations, and she like kind of dropped the ball on more than one occasion, like pretty much going against, you know, what her platform was like built on. But I feel like if there are like enough Marxists or like even like democratic socialists or like socialists like go into office, I'm just like, all right guys, like something has to change, right? Like not to be a revisionist, but I think until we get to a certain point, it's a good thing.
Well, DSA 2 has been so interesting. I mean, I don't know about how DSA LA functions, but I know nationally they've been huge. I am in periodic contact with Honda Wang with DSA New York or DSA NYC, and I think they're doing amazing work, particularly with like labor unions. Rank and file organizing. Yeah, their rank and file strategy is insane.
Absolutely.
And electorally, they're I mean, you know, to say it colloquially, they're copping dubs. I mean, like you're seeing massive electoral victories for the DSA.
Yes.
And I think that's like amazing. Now they're to my right, and I'm sure they're to yours as well. Ideologically, for the most part, even the Marxist wing of DSA, I think is, I don't know, I don't necessarily see overlap with them as much.
For sure.
But like, I don't think it's impossible for me to deny, like, one, the praxis they're putting, like they're implementing on the ground, but also just the electoral victories. I mean, like, I think in the next election cycle, DSA is looking at potentially doubling the amount of DSA candidates. I mean, like Nina Turner's a really good example of that. Yeah, right. No, I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's such a unique time, I think, in American politics. Like we're seeing a lot of overlap, I think, with like the 1960s, but with the difference being that instead of seeing this like reactionary Red Scare type mentality, we're actually seeing the first generation really, that hasn't been kind of inundated with this like Cold War rhetoric. And so we're seeing in a lot of ways what the 60s could have been. You know,
for sure.
I think that a lot whenever I'm seeing a lot of the protests now. Not to say there weren't massive strides in the civil rights movement in the 60s. But to see like actual, like, we're getting open leftists in electoral positions, like in Congress, in
sure.
state and local, like outside of like maybe a mayoralship or like maybe like a sporadic like city council member. Like we're seeing like real power players essentially openly calling themselves socialists. And I think that is fascinating for a number of reasons.
Yeah, I hope more comes out of it. Because like I'm Vietnamese, like I'm part of the like diaspora. I feel like a lot of like Asian Americans are definitely still unlearning like a lot of the Cold War like imperialist propaganda. But like kind of touching on like a point that we already did, it's like the tide is shifting, because I started making like my American War in Vietnam TikToks, and like so many Vietnamese people, like kids, teenagers, were like, wait, like I researched this and like you're right, you know, because like our whole lives we learned something different. But like this unlearning happening like at such a young age, I'm like, damn, like I feel like they're gonna make some like massive like power strides once they're our age, you know, or like even probably younger, because I know like 16-year-olds that know more than me and talk much more eloquently than I do. But yeah, I'm like so hopeful.
No, absolutely. But I mean, that being said, I think it's about time we cut this, just for the sake of both of our times. I know you have a bookstore to get to.
Yeah.
But yeah, once again, thank you, Kai, for coming onto the show. If anyone listening is interested in more of their work, you can find them again on TikTok at the handle What's in Tifa, and on Twitter at TankyPill. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on again, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you for having me. Thanks everyone for listening.